New level themes? New gimmicks? Shadow? Is this the evolution of the boost formula that I've been waiting for? Yes, actually. So let's talk about it. As many of you know, Sonic X Shadow Generations just released and it's doing really well actually. The game already sold 1 million copies the same day as it's released, and for good reason. Generations is already a fantastic game as it is, so re-releasing it with a whole new campaign, that's a steal. As you can tell, I am more than happy with this release and I highly encourage you to check it out if you haven't already. But that's not what we're here for. As you can tell, I really like the boost formula in Sonic games. I made a whole production talking about it, but to keep it brief, it's my favorite playstyle in Sonic. It's just an overall very fun system that I felt had a lot of untapped potential. So to say that I was surprised to see the Sonic team still using this system even after Frontiers was quite an understatement. And so I just want to make a fun production talking about Shadow Generations. You see, I've been playing this game for a good 20 to 30 hours, I'd say, and I have to say, this is by far one of the best iterations of the boost formula we've seen since, well, Sonic Generations. I'd go as far as to say the level design is on par with something like Unleashed, and that's my favorite game in the entire series. What makes Shadow Generations design so perfect? Is this what we can expect for future Sonic releases? Well, that's what we're here to do. I'll be giving a much deeper insight into what makes the boost formula so fun, compare the different attempts with it in past games, and how Shadow Generations manages to build upon that same foundation. Let's take a trip through memory lane for this one, cause this is our look at Shadow Generations. As always, before we start, I just want to say that if you're enjoying our productions, or you want to see more Sonic-related stuff from us, be sure to press that subscribe button. And while you're at it, be sure to check out our Patreon to help further grow the channel. With that said, let's begin. In order to understand what makes Shadow Generation so perfect, we first need to understand what makes the boost formula work in the first place. We made a full production talking about what makes it so fun, but I really want to take the time to actually explain what makes it such a fascinating gameplay style. On paper, the boost formula is really not all that complex. You're given a long hallway-like stage with several obstacles that you need to avoid. The way you get around them is through your understanding of the level itself in order to get the best possible time. Things like boost, homing attack, and drift are tools that the game encourages you to use, and the reward is in maintaining the highest possible speed when utilizing said abilities to keep a constant flow throughout the entire level. There's a whole rhythm to it, and it really gives this sense of being an actual speedrunner. As you can tell, since the game is so reliant on how Sonic maneuvers around these stages, that means the level design is integral, if not the core thing, needed to make a good boost game. But what makes good level design in this context? There's two things that separates the daytime stages in Unleashed from something like Forces: the level complexity and the variety. Level complexity is pretty straightforward. How much input is the player able to give throughout the stage? How much drifting, boosting, lane switching, and whatever else they can do is actually done within it. And are there any points where the player doesn't need to do anything? This is important to keep in mind because the core philosophy of the boost formula is how well you're able to understand the different moves needed at specific points in the stage. If you actively design a boost level where the player has no control, that immediately removes any focus and immersion a player would have when playing. That's a big reason why Force's level design just doesn't fundamentally work as a boost game. Now, don't get me wrong, you can make an action set piece work, but it's best to keep these short and few and far between. While Generations and Unleashed have a very different philosophy in approaching the complexity of a level, they still manage to make it a very enjoyable time for the player, with the exception of Planet Wisp. Now, on to level variety. Level variety is the different obstacles the player needs to deal with and how spread out they all are. Of course, this also includes the smaller things, like what sequences these obstacles are in, and what other shortcuts you can utilize to skip parts of a level. Keeping variety helps keep each one of these levels stand out. Plus, if done really well, you can make it so players have an abundance of ways to mess around and find their own ways of beating the stage. That's a big reason why I consider a lot of the more original cyberspace levels in Frontiers to be really well made. Now that we have a basic idea of what makes a boost game so enjoyable, we can finally discuss how Shadow Generations perfects this formula. And believe me, there's a lot to go over. You see, aside from the level design, Shadow Generations adds one more key to just not a good boost level, but overall experience of these games: the moveset. When looking back at these games, the different tools at your disposal have always been the same. However, Shadow Generations takes a step further and gives us a whole new set of tools to work with. You have things like your boost, your stomp, your ability to switch lanes, all the basics. However, one of the biggest additions made here is Shadow's iconic Chaos control, which lets you completely freeze time. This is done through a meter you can use, and so long as you have the energy, you're free to use it wherever and whenever. The way you get energy is by either killing enemies or destroying this item box that contains it. This changes everything. Not only is the game built around it, with you having to use it to kill enemies that may be too strong or fast, but it also gives you opportunities to take shortcuts if used in the right circumstances. This adds a huge layer of depth to the level design that I've never seen before. And since the game is pretty generous with how often you use chaos control, this leaves a lot of creative ways to plan out your run. That's not all though. Did I mention that there's a higher emphasis in combat too? While speed and spectacle is part of the fun in the boost formula, Shadow Generations manages to make it so you can fight enemies without breaking the flow of the levels. It's nothing too crazy. At most, you'll be using chaos control or your doom spear to throw off an enemy to then finish them, but that's exactly what makes it so fun. It's fast, it's snappy, and the game encourages you to use your homing attack, or teleport, to get farther and faster. Yes, you can still use your boost to breeze through your obstacles, but unlike Unleashed, this game makes you use more than just the boost. This is where Shadow's new Doom abilities come in. I won't go over the whole story, but these are basically powers Shadow gets from the Black Doom, the main antagonist in this campaign. There's Doom Spear, a ranged attack that lets you stun enemies, Doom Blast, which lets you launch strong enemies and teleport to them, Doom Surf, which mainly lets you travel on water, and Doom Morph, my personal favorite since it lets you swing and traverse through, well, whatever this is. There's also the Doom Wings that let you practically skip huge parts of levels. They're really fun if you know where to use them. This may seem like too much for a moveset, but the game does a fantastic job at teaching you each of these moves. That's not even mentioning how good they utilize all of them within the levels. They consistently keep you engaged with new obstacles or fast spectacle pieces. This is done by maintaining a ton of variety in the different obstacles and the ways you can approach them. Seriously, there's some routes that you can take by just making a small and well-coordinated jump. But other times, you have to be smart with your surroundings and use your chaos control to reach a certain path. I'd call myself pretty skilled at this game, and I keep finding new ways to beat these levels even faster. There's also levels where they change the scenery in real time. That's the first time we've seen anything like that in the boost formula, and it's incredible. And don't even get me started on how lengthy these levels can be. Even on my fastest runs, I spent up to 4 to 5 minutes on these. That's longer than most Unleashed levels. Obviously a long stage wouldn't be good if it wasn't fun, but I'm more than happy to say that these are some of the most polished and entertaining boost stages I've ever played. So why not rank them? Usually I don't tend to do these sorts of things on our productions, but for fun, I'll be ranking all of the Shadow Generations levels. This will be quick, and I feel like it'll be a good demonstration of what makes its level design so perfect. Let's begin. Space Colony Arc Act 1. Fantastic first level. The music keeps you pumped, the platforming is relatively easy, but it does make very good use of teaching you how chaos control works. I really like this one section where the game wants you to use it against these missiles, and go on top of them like platforms. This is one of the 3 acts that can change halfway as you go, and it's always a treat to watch. At first I felt like this would get annoying on replays, but considering the length of these levels, I see this as a good way to take a breather from all the action. Mostly since the platforming, at least in this particular act, is a lot simpler. Overall, it's a great start to a great game. Space Colony Arc Act 2. The second act plays more like a 2D level, but I will say, this might be my favorite iteration of 2D Sonic gameplay. It controls really well, and the different abilities make it very enjoyable to traverse through. The level itself is once again pretty straightforward. It does make good use of teaching you Doom Spear, so that's nice. Rail Canyon Act 1. Decent level. It's very heavy on the rail grinding like the original, yet it still manages to add various obstacles like these enemies that can break the rails. I like that you can use chaos control to stop them from doing that, which allows you to take a different and faster path. Regardless, it's my second least favorite in the game. Act 2, pretty fun. I actually like it a little more than Act 1. This giant train with spikes is pretty neat. Kingdom Valley Act 1. Easily one of the best levels in the game. It's so funny because I initially thought it was okay, but after playing it a couple more times, it's grown on me. There's a lot of different paths to take, and you get to use Doom Surf, and there's no transition to a different scenery. Just an all-around fun level with lots of ways to get around. Act 2. I will say that this one was admittedly a little more forgettable. Maybe there were more paths you can take, but overall it's an okay level. Sunset Heights Act 1. Easily one of my most replayed stages in the entire game, and uses most of your main abilities to its fullest potential. Great remix from the original, and I'm just shocked that they were able to make a Forces level so much fun. This is the last of the 3 levels that change at its halfway point, but I'd say it definitely makes it more enjoyable. The platforming is a lot more engaging to go through compared to previous attempts. Act 2. Insanely good. Probably the best of all the 2D levels here. The action can get so fast and fun it starts to become overwhelming. That's how good it is. Chaos Island Act 1. I wasn't expecting to see a Frontiers level, but hey, it's honestly one of the best stages here. Its main focus is on the Doom morph, and I have to say, it's really fun to use. It is admittedly a little clunky when you have to do a vertical jump, but other than that, it's a great tool. It makes you travel really fast while keeping an insane amount of momentum. Of all the levels, this one definitely has the most moving parts. You'll be boosting, to then doing homing attacks, to the Doom morph, just all kinds of maneuvers with so many different paths. If you need a stage that really shows off how fun Shadow Generations is, this is the one. Act 2. Just as fun and enjoyable as the first one. They still make great use of the Doom morph ability, but by showing off its speed rather than its traveling capabilities. Radical Highway Act 1 and Act 2. These are my least favorite levels in the game. I'm sorry guys, but in all honesty, these ones are just insanely tough, and not in a good way. I'm only putting them together because Act 2 isn't a 2D level, and admittedly that was very surprising. I've only beaten both of these a couple of times, and I still have yet to get an S rank on either of them. They're just way too long for my liking. I love lengthy boost levels, but this one's just stretching that limit. Act 2 isn't as bad as Act 1, but only by a little. They're still really well made, don't get me wrong. If you want unleashed levels of difficulty, this might be the closest the game has to offer. It makes use of almost all of your abilities and makes for some very intense platforming all back to back. Regardless of my feelings toward it, this is a fantastic stage and great for when you actually fight Doom. And I'm pretty sure that's a good way to wrap things up. I want to end off on a good note, so I'll just say this. If you haven't played Sonic X Shadow Generations, please do me a favor. Stop what you're doing and get this game. It's that good. Seriously, at the time I was making this production, I only had 20 hours on this game. Now it's 30. This is some of the best boost level design I've ever seen, and it really goes to show that this gameplay style still has a lot of potential. With how well it's been received in sales and reception, I really hope Sega takes notes for whatever their next Sonic game will be. And whether it's a boost or open zone styled game, they will forever have my support. Wait, you're telling me this game doesn't even have a single level from Shadow the Hedgehog? 0 out of 10!